Fuck yeah, America. Yeah. All right, so I think you have been de-yankified enough for the afternoon, and we need to flip back into something a little bit more, I don't know, obnoxious. So I don't know if a lot of people, I've been around a bit, and a lot of people don't recognize me because I change my appearance often. That's what happens when your hair grows. Great story about a free penthouse suite in New York City because someone thought I was Zach Galifianakis over beer. It was great. I'm post-weight. I run a couple companies, and one of the things that's most consistent is that I speak a lot. These are a few selected speaking engagements, which puts me at well over 100,000 miles a year and still have a happy marriage, so try to debunk everything everyone said today. And 3 daughters that keep me busy. So I thought about what topics to rant about, because that's usually what I do best, is I do, especially if it's going to be less than a 40-minute talk, I'm going to rant. I am a grouchy, gray-beard sailor software engineer, sailor in the language department usually. But the best title I've ever had is software proctologist. And I find myself up in it, up in the business all the time, every layer of the stack. Over the last 20 years, I've written around 350,000 lines of production code that's run in probably every company around. So everywhere from Google to Facebook to Yahoo to Apple and all of that stuff. So, and on all the layers, so everything from device drivers and kernels all the way up to JavaScript frameworks in a browser. And I didn't really want to talk about any of that. So I thought maybe I should talk about martial arts, because people were talking about martial arts before, and it seems like everybody's got a different martial art. And one thing that I've realized, if you've ever met any software engineers or anyone in general who really likes martial arts, they can be a little bit obnoxious about it, but their decision making and the way they approach problems really mirrors the mentality of that martial art. They kind of adopt it on as their alter ego. So the martial art that I practice is Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu. And that is Soke Hatsumi. He's the Grandmaster of Ninjutsu. There will be no future Grandmaster of Ninjutsu. He has declared that it is no longer applicable to modern life. Ninjutsu has 13 art forms in it. One of them is cross-dressing, another one is improvised explosives, and one of them is espionage. Those 3 make it kind of a weird martial art. It's more of a lifestyle. But one of the things that's always interesting about this martial art is that, he doesn't know very many English words, but one of them is sneaky. Sneaky, soft, sneaky. There's one element to that, is that you should never be touching your opponent unless you're taking them off balance or causing extreme pain, preferably both. So whenever people are doing things like locks and things like that, he's like, well, you had their eyeballs in front of you. Why didn't you gouge them out? Right? Why didn't you pull their skin off? Or why would you ever throw someone by grabbing their neck when their ear can come off, right? And it's a very brutal thing, and it's all about cheating. So when you talk about MMA, for example, big fights and things, there's like, I would never do that, because the first place I would kick them is off limits. So I'm not about playing by the rules. It's always about achieving the most amount of value with the least amount of effort. So what I decided to do was rant on ranting, given that it's a meta conference. And there's 2 ways to rant. One, you can be poignant, right? You can add a lot of value. And the other way is you can just drivel at people and leave them with no soul at the end of all of it. So I will try to do the former. So a brief aside on software engineers. So software engineers, it turns out they all learn in different ways, because people all learn in different ways. And despite a lot of evidence, software engineers are people too. So in organizations, instead of dragons being in there, I would say that there are a lot of dichotomies in organizations. And I'll take one as a great example, which is a common thread on the internet about interruptions. When I have my headphones on, fuck off. This is my time. How dare you interrupt me? And it's like, sorry, I didn't pay your salary. I had my headphones on, right? Like, you know, you're part of a team. It's not about you. It's about the team. So interruptions are absolutely costly, though, right? You go interrupt someone, they lose their frame of mind, they can't accomplish their tasks. On the flip side, I don't know how many times I've seen software engineers in their mind, in their mode, they're working on something because they can't solve something that's easy, that someone next to them could just solve. So at the flip side of that is that interruptions are priceless. Personally, I get interrupted all day long, right? I am an obstacle remover for our organization. People interrupt me while I'm doing work, and I have to context switch. I happen to be very good at context switching, but what I find is that when I come back to it 15 minutes later, or 7 hours later, or 30 seconds later, my perspective on the problem has changed. Someone has given me, what's that called, a shubukatu or something like that, a swift spiritual kick to the shakabuku, right? Someone basically just kicked me in the head, and I come back to the problem and I go, oh my God, I was using malloc instead of calloc. No wonder this is broken, right? So whatever level of the stack you're on, you get a new perspective of the problem. So similarly two-sided are so many aspects of office environments, right? So office environment, transparency of organization, development methodologies, these are very polarizing things, and the bottom line is you're not right? You're just on a side. So the best environments out there are those that recognize all of the reagents that are involved in building these things, right? And they add them in carefully, but they have to be mixed, right? So providing all of the reagents is called management, right? So managementless organizations, they are managed by themselves. They're self-organizing, self-managing organizations. But you'll notice one thing about them is that they're very ineffective at mixing them. Mixing the reagents, once they're there, is about passion and disruption. It's about placing unreasonable demands on people, right? It's about high praise and celebration. And it's also about a culture of leveraging failure, and that can't be done in a self-organizing group very well. That is called leadership. So the one thing that I've learned, I've built 3 companies, and we've consulted with hundreds more of companies, is that each believes that their approach to these things is right. You get up, it was last Monki Gras, GitHub, it's so awesome, it's the future, it's how everything should be done. It's like, well, I'm really glad that it worked for you. That would fail so many other places, because you have different problems you're solving, you have different markets you're addressing. It's not a circle jerk, it happens at some offices. Like, whatever it is. The bottom line is each company that comes out and says this, they're all different, right? So one thing is that they all have really creative and fun ideas. It's kind of like religion. They can't all be right, so just go with it. Right? Just figure out which one's working for you, but stop preaching about how awesome it is, because it probably doesn't apply to other people. Have a conversation instead of being an evangelist. So one of the things that's common across all of these things is, despite their differences, every organization has to have a culture of learning. It's a fundamental necessity. If anybody can name an organization that doesn't have a culture of learning, that's still in business 15 years later, I'd love to hear it. They probably have a monopoly on something, or a government contract. So there are a lot of methods for doing this. Set conferences is where we are, tech talks, all sorts of stuff. But one thread that I've learned that kind of makes them more effective is that the best learning transpires from failure. And what this talk is really about is leveraging failure in a technology world. So my one experience adage that I leave people with is that making good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from making bad decisions. Right? That's a really difficult thing to do, because, I mean, how many people like working with colleagues that make bad decisions, right? Yeah, it's great. Now, making the same bad decision twice is really, really bad, but making a bad decision is the one most affable opportunity for someone to grow, right? That is their point. So failure is really expensive. This is a tweet from me, with perhaps the most fucks in a row. I had a hole in the mitt for my skillet and burnt myself. That was great. You figure I'd learn, but no. So wonderful learning happens when this failure meets really good storytelling. So what I want to tell is a method of constructing these stories that is more likely to sink in and more likely to create good critical thinking skills. So one most important part about good storytelling, please use it for the forces of good, because good storytelling sticks. This is why urban legends are so good. If you adhere to someone's intuitions, whether they're wrong or not, they're more likely to believe you. So do not tell good stories that are lies, right? Don't say that you've dumped a ton of data into MongoDB and never had a data loss issue, right? Just don't say it, right? It's not fair. So technical storytelling is an art form just like anything else, and usually they're epic tales, despite this not being epical. But epic tales we'll get back to. Things tend to change, right? Every architecture, the most interesting parts are when things change. And those things change when people who can influence them find them no longer acceptable, right? And you would quote from Princess Bride, unacceptable, I do not think that word means what you think it means, right? So unacceptable, people always say, oh, that's unacceptable. I'm like, well, it's there still, so clearly you've accepted it. I mean, right? It's really unacceptable in flight of the change or post-change, right? It was unacceptable. Having something be unacceptable it's the British complaining that was talked about earlier. So you have to go do something about it. So people who are driven to make these changes either do those out of desperation or out of passion. And while you should always aim for passion, never, ever miss the opportunity to accept desperation with humility. Some of the most amazing things come from desperation, and some of the best stories. So, storytelling, you should build your stories out of despair. If you want to go to a leadership conference and talk to people about inspiring people, build them out of passion. If you want to go to a tech conference, show people like big scars. It's very important, and I'll tell you why. So stories of passion are really simple, but the problem is they're full of less valuable lessons because good lessons come from failures. So stories around despair, they're the heart of darkness, right? Have anybody seen the poster with the ship sinking that says it could be that your sole purpose in life is to be a demonstration to others? Be that demonstration. So basically, in storytelling, you have dissonance and repose, right? You have to construct your dissonance. And this is where all good storytelling does its heavy lifting. So no one pursues failure, right? So framing this, framing your entire talk in this idea that, let me tell you everything that went wrong, it sets the stage for people not listening to you and not believing you. Right? You don't want to frame your problem that way. You didn't say, I have this project to start. Let me start doing things wrong. Right? Let me just walk through them all. Eventually, some shit will work. Right? That's really not how you do that, and that's not good storytelling because, as Anna said earlier, you really need to put your audience's mind in the frame of mind you had while you were solving the problem. Right? That's where that failure, that's where the burn mark on here. I was cooking 3.5 pounds of ribeye, because I'm American, in four tablespoons of bacon fat in a cast iron skillet, right? So outdo that for dinner. Maybe with 28 beers, you can outdo that. That was a good dinner, right? So I'm cooking that, and I pick up the skillet, and I burn myself, right? And I'm not going to tell you a story about burning myself. I'm going to tell you a story about steak, because now everybody's listening, and they're like, God, I fucking want a steak, right? So when you frame your problem, you should briefly frame your problem. Don't tell people, this is what we built. Chances are that wasn't what you were building when you started. In technology, product roadmaps change so fast, requirements change, they evolve, they become better understood, right? So you want to have people in the context of when you started. These are the requirements that I received as I understood them that day, right? That's a very short explanation, and you can embellish those as you go through your story. And those details about how you misunderstood that problem have to come out during the storytelling, right? You want to take someone on a completely believable journey. So when you develop the solution, you have to take them through your steps of problem solving, because you can hope that they were rational decisions at the time. However catastrophic they were rational, right? And the reason that they were rational is because you had limited context for your problem. You didn't know all the details of your problem in the beginning or during. You only kind of understood them at the end when you delivered, hopefully, right? So in order to take that person on that journey and have them in the right frame of mind to receive the lessons that you received, you have to build it up the same way. You can't spoil it. You cannot show them the final result. You can't show them the discovered things before it's time. And most solutions are the organic composition of many small solutions. Nobody goes out and sets up the whole thing, right? Software is built from the ground up. And as they're designed, I completely believe they're designed down and built up. Don't believe that they translate very well to math, given that we do have a runtime. But I live in high-performance world, so everything has very high-performance constraints where I work. But the problem is that as you're building those from the ground up, your understanding of the problem space, one, is isolated to a very small section of that problem. And as the scope changes, how you're going to be used changes, and you don't even know it yet. You have to deliver it first, and then someone says, well, that shit doesn't work. So you have to go back, right? And these small solutions, they end up being developed at different points of the timeline where you understand the overall scope of the problem and the microscope of the problem differently. And almost always, these result in catastrophic failures. And that's really the entire point, right? And that despair, you cannot bring someone into that world of pain and suffering with you until you take them on that entire journey, right? So you have to take them on the journey. The downside is that ultimate tragedy really makes for a shitty lesson, right? And that's how I went out of business. And you're off stage, right? Like that's like, wow, you didn't clearly learn well enough, right? You didn't recover from it. So you really don't want to tell, or at least limit the stories you have that are actually ultimate tragedies to very few. Just try to skip that part, right? Try to find things where you have a penultimate tragedy, right? You have a tragedy, you have a success that was erected from the ashes of failure. Right? So we run a conference called Surge, and when I curated all the content the first year, I contacted all these people I knew, and I said, I want you to come tell a story about how you fucked up. I want you to tell a story. I don't want you to give a technical presentation. I don't want it to be dry. I want you to take someone on a journey through the development of your product that handed your ass to you. And I want you to bear it all on the stage, right? I just want you to tell all the money you lost, all the customers you lost, all the egg you had on your face, and how you redesigned your product to recover from that, how long that took, how much effort it took, how much engineering force did you lose, how much attrition did you have. Those are all real things that happen in organizations, and people just don't talk about them much. And I tell you what, if you tell that story well, every single engineer in that audience and every single engineering manager is more educated. They are more prepared. You actually conferred your failure onto them. The best way to learn about things is not actually failure, because that sucks. It's through someone else's failure. But if they're not good storytellers, you can't do that. And eventually you have to repose. And when you do succeed after that epic failure, you kind of stop there, right? The shit works. Don't gloat. Don't spend a lot of time on it. You just bow and exit stage left. And that's it.